Welcome everyone. We've got a very special guest today, and not only that, we also have a very special guest host today. And oh, the TV's coming on. Wait, why don't I have a picture of my guest? Let's hold on. Did forget something because we had a slight difficulty. Jackson's camera won't be on, so Jackson.
Yeah, my bad. My internet sucks. Sorry.
Okay. Well, glad you could jump in. All co-hosts are busy, so glad to have a good excuse to have you on as a co-host. So I'm really happy to have you. And
Oh, thank you.
obviously, we got a very special guest, Erika, aka Gutsick Gibbon. Erika, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing all right. Just hanging out here in sunny pollen-filled Midwestern America. Raring and ready to discuss.
Okay. Yeah, I almost made the mistake to say, so what God do you believe in and why? But that's the other show, so probably not
Uh,
going to work. So
Myself.
yeah,
Oh.
so
yeah, there you go.
Erica, tell us a little bit for the people who do not know you, which is a shame, but tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, with pleasure. Let's see. I am a primatologist in training, I guess would be an apt way of putting it. I'm currently in the process of getting my master's of research in primatology. I got my undergraduate degree in animal science with minors in biology and in anthropology. So I'm really into monkeys. That's the monkeys, apes. Of course, it's somewhat of a redundancy, I suppose, but um, yeah, all of the members of the primate order are very fascinating, including, of course, humans. So I like to talk about that, and never shut up. And to me, it's just one of the most fascinating fields out there. No shame on the general biologists, but obviously primates are the most fun order to study.
Well, so I did notice I watched you on Ross channel twice already, and it so what struck me is that usually Arn talks a lot, and when you're on, he just leans back and lets you talk. So that I thought that was kind of funny because he finally found someone who he thinks, well, maybe they should talk, and I should just
Man,
sit here and listen. That was
yeah, man, as a fan of Aaron, like I've been a fan of Aaron's for a long time. It was very fun to just sit there and discuss with him both before the show and then during the show, because he's responsible for kind of a lot of what I guess skeptic or science YouTube kind of considers like the groundwork for busting Noah's flood or busting creationism, however we want to go about it. And he's so passionate about what he does. He's a ball to talk with, and it was very fun for me to be able to like nerd out with him over primates and anthropology because he seems to have a pretty vested interest in that particular field as well, just because it seems to be a very personal thing for many creationists. They really don't like being admitting to their quote unquote humble heritage. So that tends to be something of a soft spot in those discussions and one worth investigating.
yeah. So and my first question, and I've watched you on a couple of channels, but one question I don't think got asked. So how did you get um, interested in apes and monkeys and human evolution? So what triggered that?
Yeah, man, that's actually a great question, and one I don't think I've ever been asked. It's actually kind of an interesting story. When I was a freshman in college at the University of Arkansas, I decided kind of on a whim that I was going to study abroad that summer, and I went to the study abroad fair, and I decided to join a trip called Ecology and Evolution, and the essentially like the biosphere of Tanzania. or biodiversity rather, of Tanzania. And so I joined. This was when the Ebola scare was really going on. So I applied for like a scholarship and things like that, and got accepted into the program. Fortunately, I guess unfortunately, because so many people were scared of like going to Africa because they were worried about Ebola, despite the fact that the distance from Tanzania and where the outbreak was occurring out in the west was like bigger than the distance from like Miami to Anchorage, Alaska, because people forget how gigantic Africa truly is. I mean, like Tanzania is, around the size of Texas, but it just doesn't look that way on the map. Anyway, so I ended up going on this trip, and one of the leading professors was Dr. Peter Unger. So he's a really big tooth microwear guy in physical anthropology, or sometimes referred to as biological anthropology, or human evolution. And so he essentially was working at my university because he was a pretty well-known anthropologist, but he could kind of do whatever he wanted there. So he had the freedom to pursue whatever research projects, that that fit his fancy, I suppose. But part of the trip was visiting. It was actually twofold for the primate and human evolution thing. One was Olduvai Gorge, which is a very, very famous hominid fossil site. Habilis and the Lake Tule footprints are both there and near there, respectively. But the second part that really hit home for me was when we visited Gombe Stream National Park, which is where Jane Goodall does and did all of her research. And so one afternoon, we stayed quite some time at Gombe in their camps there, right along the longest lake in the world, which is like a weird title to hold, but Lake Tanganyika. And one of the days we were like, the guys were like, all right, like today, we're going out. It was one of the first days that we were going to go see the chimpanzees. We were following the G group. And he was like, just keep an appropriate distance. We had to go through the training of like how not to make eye contact and not to upset them, and like what to do if you happen to upset a chimpanzee, which the correct answer is get the hell out of there. But we started following and searching for the chimpanzees, and we started following this small group of females, and it was one juvenile, one kind of young adult-ish, more of a young adult than a juvenile, and a mother and her infant. And we were following it like a decently close pace, with just observing and things like that. And because this terrain is super mountainous, I kind of got separated very slightly from the group. And I was like, I'm going to go in and get a closer look. And so I'm scrambling along the forest floor. It's so dramatic. I've got my camera hanging around my neck, and I'm following this sort of young adult / juvenile. And all of a sudden, I hear like this very low grumble kind of off to my left, and I turn over, and there's the mother with the infant. And she's got her hand around this infant, and we make eye contact, and it's the cheesiest sounding thing of all time. But when we made eye contact, I just got this very like immense, very pressing feeling that she was like, you shouldn't be here. Like, what are you doing here? This isn't where you belong. And I felt that, kind of in my being. I was like, it's very different than looking into the eyes of like your dog, which, while there is an immense amount of love and compassion there, it's not quite the same thing as looking into the eyes of like a hominid. So it really was an experience that kind of like jolted my interest in primates, because I was like, holy cow, like there's way more to this than I had ever really considered. And exploring that bridging gap, so to speak, of like humans and the rest of the animal kingdom. I don't know. It was just a very cool experience. It was definitely like that exact moment that I was like, holy shit, like it's going to be primates. That's what I want to look at.
Okay, so, well, I can see why that would be something that you would remember. I've thought about this several times, because people are now saying that chimps are entering the Stone Age, and I think there are a lot of animals that we don't even realize how sentient they are. So since you had more experiences with apes, what stood out for you? Was that just this one case, or were there more?
Oh no, it's all across the board. I mean, I've had the pleasure of going out and doing some other undergrad research out in Tanzania, Thailand, where they have northern and southern pig-tailed macaques, and they move in these enormous troops all together, and this particular group that was in our area, which was the Sakurada Environmental Research Center, we were out there studying the civets. My group was, and we were out there baiting our traps, camera traps, so that we were trying to investigate what kind of diet the civets would prefer, because they're omnivores. So would it be, would they frequent the feeding sites with the poultry more or with the fruit? The answer was the fruit, but our data was very sparse. It was a small sample size. But anyways, while we were out there, at one point, there was this French primatologist working there, and her whole goal was she was there to habituate these pigtailed macaques so that she could get some data on them, because this was a particular it's kind of, this group was on the verge of being a subspecies. So she wanted to, get some data and see if maybe there was a behavioral basis as well as a morphologic basis to make that separation. And me and my group are out there, we're like baiting our traps, our game cams and stuff like that. And all of a sudden we hear like these huge crashes overhead, and we look up and there are just these macaques like way up in the trees high above us, moving and shuffling around. But because we were on a fire lane, there was a gap in the tree, like in the canopy, so they had to come down and cross the fire lane in front of us. And so we all got down and we're like, all right, macaques can get pretty big. You really don't want to piss off a giant troop of 70 macaques. So we were all just kind of like waiting for them to pass by, and they do this very interesting thing with their sentries, kind of. So macaques, this particular subspecies of macaques, is somewhat matriarchal in the sense that the older females decide when it's time to move from one spot to another, but they post males up. All like when they're crossing a dangerous area, the larger males will come and essentially be like, all right, they're making sure that everyone passes safely. And so it was kind of funny because originally they were like all crossing this fire lane in front of us. And so they posted a male. I say this I'm very much anthropomorphizing them, but they posted a male there. And then when a couple started coming on our other side as well, a different male got up and went and walked over there as well. So it's like, they understand their system and they understand why it works. And I don't think people give, some of our less cognitively inclined old world monkeys that kind of credit. Usually it's all about gorillas and baboons and bonobos and orangs, and not very many people care outside of like general ecology for like what are the baboons up to, what are the macaques up to, what are the vervets up to. But they're very, very their social systems are just really complicated and very, very involved. And I noticed that you mentioned a lot of our apes are in their Stone Age, but I think that argument could be put forth for many different monkeys, including like some of our platyrrhines or like our New World monkeys, because capuchins use stone tools as well to like crack open very difficult to open nuts and things of this nature. So I think that primates in general represent this gradient. That's the best way of putting it. Consciousness and cognitive ability is a gradient. I think that people oftentimes try to pinpoint like, oh, when was the first consciousness, or when was the first, theory of mind? And I don't think that there is a species that represents that line. I think it's more along like everything has that to a degree, and we are arbitrarily making ourselves the highest degree, and maybe we are, but maybe we're not as well. Like it's very difficult to pass judgment on organisms who we can't directly communicate with.
Yeah, I'd fully agree. So, what I've learned is that now I forgot what they're called in English. They're in Africa. They stand up and look.
Meerkats.
Meerkats. So meerkats seem to have a language where they can identify when someone's coming, and there was a researcher who discovered that they have their language is so sophisticated they can't tell if it's a man or a woman, but they can tell there's a human coming in a yellow shirt or a human coming in a red shirt. And I thought that was pretty amazing, and the fact that we're on the verge of trying to discover how language works for animals like that. I mean, that to me that seems a really, really interesting field. So,
You know, Peter, I'm sure Erika can tell you more about it, but like, we watched this documentary in anthropology where there are these monkeys, these African monkeys, all living in very close association, and if one spots a hawk, for instance, they have a different call for that versus like a snake
Mm-hmm.
or a jaguar,
Mhm.
and the other ones recognize that particular call and relay it in their own language.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the Campbell's monkeys. They have like a degree of syntax to their communication, which is really really interesting. They can combine sounds. Like it's kind of funny. The researchers who did that experiment had to come up with some way of like quantifying these calls, and so the calls had to have like names. So they'd be like, this one sounds like crack cow, and then it can be combined with boom, and if it's combined with boom, that means this. And so they can like change the root of the quote unquote sentence around to mean different things. So Jackson's dead on with that.
Yeah. So one of the things that stood out for me is that meerkats aren't. They might look cute, but they're actually not. When they're crossing a road, they will send out their young first, and if they survive, then the older ones go. It's I,
Yeah.
That's how
so
Yeah,
you gain experience.
yeah,
yeah,
that's definitely gonna grow them up fast, huh?
yeah. I mean, that's probably it's kind of a Darwin Award. If you don't get it, well, you're out of the gene pool. So
Yeah, it's just some light infanticide. It's no big deal.
yeah. Okay, so we have our first question from the side chat. Beach Price says, "Has Erica ever spent time with baboons?"
Baboons, yes. I very briefly, I have never spent time with baboons as my study species, but there were at Gombe Stream there were tons of olive baboons. They baboons can be pretty. They're very fun to watch, but they can be kind of nasty. So we would wash our clothes in that lake there, Lake Tanganyika, and well, before we got there, my professor was like, "All right, like, listen, you got to keep a very close eye on your clothes because there are baboons everywhere, and they're going to come in and maybe take your clothes." And we're like, "Okay, that's kind of funny, but they're not going to take our clothes. Like that's kind of ridiculous." Well, sure enough, that's exactly what they do. You hang up your clothes on these clotheslines, and these massive, usually it's like juvenile males, but there's usually like an adult around somewhere too, and you really don't want to. I mean, if you've seen the canines on those adult males, like you really don't want to mess with them. And they'll just come and yank your stuff right off the line and make a beeline for the nearest tree. And so you're coming after them like as fast as you can, and they're like they've got like their little strategy all like figured out with their little lookout, and how they can most effectively take your clothes to the top branch and then bite it a couple of times, and then they're like, oh shit, this isn't anything good anyways, and then they drop it and leave you alone. Um, but yeah, that my experience with baboons is not extensive, but what I do know is that they're very very mischievous, and it's probably just with olives. I have a let me think. One of my kind of colleagues, I guess, in the program that I'm currently in, worked in South Africa with baboons for a long time, and she's a big baboon fan. So why I don't know, but she definitely loves them.
I just that hurts me that you guys like wash your clothes in Lake Tanganyika. Is like one of the biodiversity hotspots for cichlids, and it's like, let's just wash our clothes.
Yeah, they had like specifications for the kind of soap you could bring, kind of.
Uh-huh.
It had to be like water, like wholly soluble, I guess, in water, and like
Uh-huh.
very non-harmful or whatever. But I find it very like doubtful that it's doing absolutely nothing. I mean,
Yeah.
but yeah, we definitely just washed our stuff right in the river. The area is so humid too that if you don't do it like at midday, that's just not getting dry ever. Like it's just
Right.
not gonna dry.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, okay. And so from there you got into to human evolution.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Humans. Yeah.
is
Humans.
that also because you visited Africa and maybe picked up a thing or two there?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been interested. Like growing up as a kid, I mean, I grew up. My family's religious, I suppose, but then like the middle school that I went to is very young Earth creationist. So I definitely had that point of view up until like about high school. And then I was like, hey, look, a public school biology textbook. Wait a second. Hold on a minute here.
Oh,
Hmm.
wasn't
Conventional
that
science.
riddled with errors? I mean, I've spoken to Kent Hovind. According to him, that they
We
can't
cover
be
the
trusted.
rocks. Oh yeah, and but yeah, the Kent Hovind stuff. I actually very much wish that I could remember specifically which videos they used to show us because I remember we had like a whole worldview course, which was code for "This is why we're right," and they included naturalism as like one of the worldviews, but really they were just trying to equate everything into like, look, everybody believes in something. And I always thought the example that I use quite frequently is they were like, heh, they've never even found the missing link. They think they found Homo habilis. They haven't found Homo habilis. Like they don't even have anything to bridge the Australopithecines from genus Homo. And I remember hearing that and thinking, yeah, that makes sense. And then I was like, but wait, if they've never found one, why does it have nomenclature? Like, why does it have a name if they've never found a specimen of Homo habilis? And then it turns out, of course, that they just had, and that there were actually multiple. But I guess my curriculum there, quote unquote, wasn't okay with that to the extent that they were like, just throw that one out, like. Just go ahead and put that one in the back. No one will notice. Yeah, I mean, so to me, there was always this idea like growing up where I was like, okay, like these guys are okay with us being mammals, but that's where they draw the line. And I was always kind of curious as to why. Why is it that there's such like this emotional wall that's put up with this idea of us just being another member of the animal kingdom? And that's kind of what got me into biological anthropology in the first place because I wanted to see the extent to which humans actually were different because Robert Sapolsky, who's like a big baboon guy himself, he's like the lead on pretty much any groundbreaking baboon paper from like the past whatever 3 decades. And I listened to a really good podcast to him a while back where he was like, yeah, the thing about humans is our behaviors can generally be categorized into like three groups, right? There's the behaviors that we do that are just like what everything else does. I mean, we just do the same thing, albeit in, I guess in a scaled different way. But as far as like a one-to-one, it's pretty much the same. And the example he uses is that if you've got two female hamsters and you put them in a cage together, their estrus cycles will link up. Well, the same thing happens to girls when they have roommates. Their menstruation cycles sync up. And so that was the example for that. And then he was like, there's another one where humans do something that's pretty much the same, but they put their own twist on it. So an example of that would be like how we vocalize. Like we have very specific vocalization patterns, and potentially one of the most, if not the most complicated means by which we to verbally speak with one another. And then he was like, and then the third category, which is of course the smallest category, is that which humans are completely unique. And the example that he uses for that is he was like, we empathize we empathize across space and time, which is something that no other organism is capable of doing to our knowledge. Like we can look at a picture of like a dog that looks quite sad, or like an ASPCA commercial. We don't know that dog, but we feel empathy for it. We're upset by that, which is something that's very unique to humans. And so to me, I was like, that was kind of the line I was looking for. Like, to what degree are humans different? Is it reasonable to set ourselves apart? And the conclusion that I've come to thus far is no. We do things differently, but only by a matter of degree.
Well, so now I've got a question because famously, Coco the gorilla, who was visited by Robin Williams, she was
Mm.
told that Robin Williams had passed away. When you say we feel empathy, um, she was just told that and responded to it that it was really really sad. So couldn't we say that apes have that ability as well, at least up to a certain degree?
Absolutely, yes. My point, which I guess I didn't articulate properly now that I'm thinking back on it, isn't that they don't feel empathy. It's that if you show a picture to a chimpanzee of like a dog that's being beaten, I suppose you could ask them if they feel sad about it, but you won't really be able to know the degree of which that they're feeling empathy for what is essentially just a drawing, right?
Hmm.
But humans, on the other hand, can empathize with things that aren't real. We get sad by stories. You know, it's something that doesn't actually impact us in any real way. We can ascribe pain and turmoil or joy and happiness to characters that aren't real. With the scenario with Coco, I absolutely would agree that she's capable of experiencing empathy. I mean, Coco was an incredible individual just on her own. All of the signing apes are very, very interesting case studies, mostly because for quite some time they were kind of written off. There was a paper that was released shortly after all that stuff about Coco was kind of just burgeoning and coming out. And they were like, look, we can't prove that Coco's actually signing, new things. We can't necessarily prove that she's, there's a level of interpretation that is unavoidable by the person that she's signing to. And their whole idea was that we are ascribing more meaning to her signs than perhaps she's ascribing to them. Because, every once in a while, they didn't like the idea that sometimes she would get things wrong when she was signing. But the interesting thing is, Kanzi, the male bonobo who was taught, using a lexigram, which is much more, what's the word I'm looking for? It's, there's more intent behind it because each lexigram only means a specific thing. Now, a lexigram is this big touch screen with all these symbols on it, and all the symbols mean one thing and one thing specifically.
Yeah, I've seen that. It looks, yeah, to a layperson, it looks almost like hieroglyphs.
Yeah, very
And
much so.
and
Yeah.
it's
But
really, it's not only really intricate. It's there's a lot of symbols to choose from.
there are, and the interesting thing with Kanzi is that he not only can write out sentences to make requests by using his lexigram, but he can also answer questions using the lexigram or when being asked a question in English. So it seems like the limit and this is really interesting stuff, especially considering that Kanzi as a bonobo has a brain case that's like approximately a third the size of ours. But he's still capable nonetheless. If you put all these items out in front of him and say, a little children's toy refrigerator, and you say, Kanzi, put the pine needles in the refrigerator, he can just pick up the pine needles and go and put them in the fridge. He's understanding precisely what you're saying. And because he can ask novel questions on his own using the lexigram, that has an incredible implication for whether or not he's responding just to a stimulus or whether there's something more going on upstairs. It's all about the novelty with these kinds of things.
Well, but it's really fascinating that these experiments are done. I mean, there's not only the communication, but it would seem to me if you actually can get an ape to talk, the things you could learn about their behavior, about their communication among each other, and
Right.
that to me would
Uh,
be really fascinating to learn.
I would wonder if one of their first expressions would be horror. What do you mean you're putting my species in cages for display?
Yeah, I
Well,
can't imagine that they would be big fans of us and the things that we do. Were they capable? I mean, like they did a whole a whole trilogy on that. It was called The Planet of the Apes.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm. It, uh, Vice Rhino did a video a while back where he mentioned, like how human, apes look when you go see them at the zoo, and I was reminded of when my dad and I went to the zoo in North Carolina and I saw the gorillas up close. Yeah, they look a lot like people up close, and it makes
Yeah,
you feel a little uncomfortable looking at them behind the glass.
it very much does. There was a picture that went viral a couple of weeks ago. There's a gorilla. I can't remember which zoo she's at. I want to say Atlanta, but I'm not sure. But she has a bit of vitiligo on her hands, and because of that, her pinky just looks like a fat human pinky. Like it's just of like a Caucasian individual.
Mm-hmm.
It's got the nail and everything, and you see that, and it's like a slap in the face. The interesting thing with all of those language experiments, I mean, so with monkeys, with old world monkeys, it seems that the limiting factor for speaking is both morphological and kind of neurological. But I don't know how that translates necessarily to the great apes. Like, I know that their tongue is more anchored than ours is, so they can't make all of the same sounds. But one of the biggest criticisms which is why, of course, we teach them sign language. But one of the biggest criticisms of the sign language stuff, like I said, was the concern that, okay, they're just responding to a stimulus because they know when they make this sign, they get this reward. And when I was learning about that this past year, me and a couple of my colleagues were kind of like, okay, but isn't that just what humans do? Like, that's how we learn to speak. Because when we say certain words, when we vocalize certain things, we get certain things to happen. I mean, that's how babies cry. They cry and then they get attention, and then they start learning how to make more and more complex sounds to ask for things and get what they want. So again, we reach this point of a gradient. Yes, human language is much more complicated than even when we teach other apes sign language. But it's still a simple gradient of like, do this, this happens. And then humans essentially took that to the next level of saying, okay, well, now we can discuss abstract concepts. Okay, well, why do we discuss abstract concepts? Because it's fun. That's a reward in and of itself. It's an incentive. So yeah, I again, you reach this point of like, well, how different are we really? And all of that difference is crammed into what, 6 or 7 million years. It is a very interesting rabbit hole to fall down.
Well, and what I'm thinking is, you could say they can't make all the noises that we can make, but who's to say if they haven't developed a language based on the sounds they can make? I mean, wouldn't that be a possibility?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, any kind of communication that involves a sender and a recipient, and information is being passed, verbally, or in some cases, I guess, subsonically, however bats do it. Any organism that essentially tries to tell another organism something or convey that something is occurring, it's just communication all across the board. And it's why social species have much more complicated means of communicating with one another than solitary animals do, because it's a huge selective advantage to be able to tell others what's going on, and get a message to them by one means or another. And the funny thing is you don't really even have to be necessarily that intelligent to do that. Like, eusocial, quote unquote, organisms like ants and wasps and termites and things like this, they do the same thing, but they do it chemically. So who is to say what is and what is not a language? I mean, I've said this in other kind of shows, I guess, because I think it's just so interesting. But there's a ground monkey called a gelada. They look a lot like baboons, but they're not baboons. They're theropithecids, not members of Papio. And they're beautiful. They live on the Ethiopian highlands. They've got these big, gorgeous capes along their backs, the males do, and they're sometimes called bleeding heart baboons. Again, not a baboon, but because they have this necklace of blisters that sounds terrible, but it swells up really red because their capes are so long that the butt swelling thing doesn't work so well for them. So both males and females have this kind of red ring around their throats and across their chests. And generally, by the primatology community, they're not considered to be like particularly smart old world monkeys. Like, they're not known for being very complicated. They spend all their time eating grass. They're the only graminivorous primates that we know of, which is really weird. They just sit in the Ethiopian highlands and chow down on grass and basically hang out with one another. So it was really interesting when they started recording all of their calls, because, like I said, they're not very smart. They're not necessarily known for having these complicated vocalizations. But once they recorded them and they kind of put them into a statistical analysis, what was found out was that these geladas, their vocalizations follow the most basal human language laws So Zipf's law and Menzerath's law, which are basically like laws of efficiency that all human languages follow, every single one of them. And the most basal form of old world monkey communication also follows that pattern. And interestingly enough, there was a paper that came out earlier this year where they found that some of the neural language centers in the brain probably evolved way earlier than we thought. We're talking like 20 to 30 million years ago, which is coincidentally about the same time that the old world monkeys evolved. So it's like you've got all of these different, lines of evidence coming in to support the fact that language and communication is a really big deal for most primates. And so selection for that very early on was probably just like a thing that was going on. And then it just got whipped into hyperdrive in humans. And by whipped into hyperdrive, I just mean we have these very, very large vocabularies. That doesn't mean that our communication is necessarily better. It just means that we can say more things and get across more complicated messages to our knowledge by the vocalizations that we use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I just have to make this comment because it happens so often on this channel. DNA is a language, I've been told.
Ugh.
So what's to say what isn't a language? But I do want to circle back briefly when you said you were a young Earth creationist and then started studying all of this. So how big was the shock that actually there was evidence? I mean, I recently was in a conversation with a young Earth creationist from Belgium, and we got into a huge fight because he kept saying, well, they never found Lucy's entire skeleton, so the feet were just made up, and the hands were just made up because they didn't find those. And then I told him, well, listen, from her species, there are more individuals found. As far as I know, they found men, women, and children.
Yes,
and it was confirmed that the hip was reconstructed, which was something that he said was humans trying to make it fit.
They love that one.
And they didn't have the feet. And I told him, well, but there's a species. And then I sent him a link, and he complained that according to Google, it was not secure. So they didn't have the safety certificate on that particular website. And I just got fed up at some point when he kept going back. Well, yeah, but they never found Lucy's entire skeleton. And I thought, this is a level of dishonesty I just can't deal with this. Then just go ahead if that's what you want to believe. But so how was that for you when you started discovering everything?
Oh man, I mean it's huge because the thing is I'm coming from like a middle school education, right? And it's like you trust your teachers, you trust the adults in your life, and you trust that they're going to be honest with you and teach you. That's their job, they're teachers. And that's really and truly part of the root of why I'm on YouTube and trying to do what I'm trying to do and educate people about this kind of stuff to the best of my ability, because I felt so betrayed, by these teachers who I'd, over the course of my middle school career, if you want to call it that, formed relationships with. I trusted these people. They were supposed to like be educating me and steering me in the right direction. And then to find out that so much of it was just nonsense. And by nonsense, I mean like a lot of the stuff that they were telling me just about how flawed evolutionary theory is. I found it appalling. It was just absolutely shell-shocking for me that I was like, oh my god, like adults, wait a second, adults lie? And they lie to kids? Which of course has only been reinforced as time goes on. But, to me, it was just so, I mean, and I don't really, I'm not trying to throw shade on like creationists, I guess, but I throw enough shade on them as it is. But it's like, it seemed like a no-brainer. Like the second I had the information in front of me, I was like, wait a second. wait a second, hold on. This fits together like a perfect puzzle, and yeah, because it's science, it's like a beautiful jigsaw puzzle and a couple of the pieces are missing. That doesn't mean you can't see the perfect, like what the picture is making up, which is that the earth is very ancient and life changes through time, and as it responds to its environment. And so, yeah, and since then I've run into a great multitude of individuals like you just described. There's a wall that goes up, is honestly what I think. I think you reach a point in conversations with a lot of these people where it's like they're not dumb as people, but you reach a point where the wall is emotional, and it's composed of the bricks of dogma, for lack of a better term, I guess. Um, and that's so sad to me, because a lot of times these are people who genuinely are like interested in science and the beauty of the world around us, and they just can't get past that point. And for some of them, I think it's just because that's how they were raised. For some of them, I think it's rooted in the fact that people don't want to consider themselves as just another animal, which I don't know why. Animals are awesome. I mean, I think that it's there's whatever beauty in that, and humility in that origin. But yeah, I totally get the frustration. I hear the hip thing all the time, and my favorite for that one is to go back and be like, all right, read the original report, because when Johansen and company are describing the specimen, they're like, yeah, well, we found Lucy's pelvis crushed and in an anatomically impossible position. That's why it was reconstructed. It was anatomically impossible, not for a biped, but for either a biped or a quadruped. So, there's that. And then, of course, as you pointed out very accurately, I might add, we have more specimens of Afarensis than we know what to do with. Which is great. I mean, we live in a golden age of paleontology right now, which is just love it.
Well, so it's funny that you should mention the fact that young Earth creationists are taught the wrong thing. We have someone in the side chat. He's mentioned by Creation Ministries International quite frequently as an atheist blogger, no less. Mr. PZ Myers is in the side chat, and he recently did a rant on Kent Hovind, and said, if you want me, I'm not going to do a debate with Kent, but if you want me to come on your channel and rant about Hovind. So I sent him a tweet and just asked if he saw it, and he did. Kent Hovind is the reason why this channel exists. I mean, I stumbled onto 100 Reasons Why Evolution is Stupid, and that's when I created my first Twitter account, and then found the ACA and got jealous of Matt Dillahunty that he got to talk to these people. So I thought, well, I'm going to make a channel, so I'm going to go for it. That's where the name came from. So right. It's, to me, that's so sad that you've got possibly really bright children who are taught something that is absolutely not true, and the fact that a whole lot of them will be stuck in that mindset, and as you said, it becomes emotional. They become emotionally attached, because obviously, and Dawkins pointed that out on Australian television when he was on a show that was hosted by Young Earth Creationists, and he said the Young Earth Creationists have it right, because if evolution is true, the Bible is false, and I think that is the biggest problem with the more fundamentalist or Bible literalists. And that's where you got a complete detachment, and you take away people's identity. If evolution is true, then what life have they been leading up until then? And I can see that a lot of people would struggle with that.
Yeah, I think Jackson's backstage. By the way, we gotta re-let him in.
Oh,
Um, Jackson, are you there?
Yes, my internet keeps dropping on me, but I think it should be okay now.
Yeah, it's fine. I
Of
just
course,
tried.
that's what I said last time. No, I've been wrong before. So
Hey, listen, that's the beauty of being in the science supporting camp is that we're allowed to be wrong constantly.
well, yeah, I'm sure that's yeah, easy for standing to capitalize on because I'm always wrong, right?
Oh my God. Yeah. Speaking of standing. Yeah,
Or
standing.
not.
Standing. Yeah. Let's not. I talk enough
Yeah.
about standing for truth.
I was yeah, I was enjoying listening to the, all the talks about the primates and everything. It's all
Oh
very
yeah.
interesting.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's the thing. That's the absolutely mind-blowing part about primatology is that it's like, and Robert Sapolsky said this himself as well in the podcast that I'd listened to him speak on, which is hosted on the Human Origins podcast by the Leakey Foundation. Find it at your wherever you find and listen to your podcasts.
Are you getting paid right now?
I wish those guys owe me money. I've been sending them more customers than they know what to do with.
Hey, I mean, if we're all getting paid by George Soros, where is my check?
Yeah, where's my check from George Soros? Where's my check from the Darwin grandchildren, great
The
grandchildren?
Illuminati, whoever is involved. I'm just, I don't care who it is. I just want my check.
I know. Yeah, exactly. Listen,
Someone owes me a lot of money.
it out to their boys. Why can't we have some?
well,
Amen.
keep in mind, Jackson. A while back, I don't think he's still around. There was a guy who called himself they, the ominous they, and so
Okay.
he figured out because a lot of things are conspiracies. They lie to you, so they made a summary what it would cost on a global basis um, to keep the conspiracy going. And so the end result was that every person on the planet needs to pay $48,000 a year
Oh my gosh.
to keep the conspiracy going. So I quickly made him an intro, and so I last year it was paid for because I made the intro. This year I have no clue how I'm going to pay this because that's a lot of money.
I mean, yeah. I don't think I can do that either.
So
Oh,
we do have another question from the side chat. It was asked twice already. I had to fit it in. So Brainbug asks, can Erica briefly crush the prevalent misinformation regarding the Trachilos footprints?
the Trachilos prince, the bane of my existence. I'm always coming for the Trachilos prince. But yeah, so essentially the idea is that some prominent trackway paleontologists who tend to work with dinosaurs and Mesozoic trackways came forward and they were like, "Look, in Crete we found this trackway, and we're pretty sure that it was made by a hominin." And they have the pictures of these prints, and they do, to, I guess, an untrained eye, I suppose, look pretty compelling, right? I mean, they've got the classic general foot shape. They're no Laetoli prints, of course, but they're not bad looking. As something that I suppose if someone was like, "Hey, look at those footprints," you wouldn't immediately be like, "No, those aren't prints." Of course, was problematic, right, for the anthropological community because they're hominin prints that are supposedly 5.6 million years old and they're bipedal in nature. And they're in Crete, of all places. Now, it wouldn't have been unheard of for there to be bipedal hominins. I mean, you've got Sahelanthropus that has a femoral head that potentially suggest, and Aurora tugenensis that potentially suggested these guys were spending some time on 2 feet, certainly more than modern members of genus Pan. But that far north, in that part of the country, or that part of the world, I suppose, was a bit weird. And so anthropologists were a bit skeptical. So they basically got these two guys, Jeff Meldrum and Esteban Sarmiento. And they had these guys come in and look at the prints, basically. Now, the interesting thing about this is that Gerlinsky, the guy the paleontologist who found the prints, the lead on the paper, the initial paper of Miocene hominin prints, was like, he was like a general trackway guy, like I said. But Jeff Meldrum and Esteban Sarmiento are experts, respectively, in hominid foot morphology and extant primate locomotion. So you really couldn't get someone more apt for the job on the case. So they had these guys go, take a look, and they released a paper called Comments on the Alleged Miocene Hominin Tracks, and they just like gangbusters roasted Gerlinsky's paper. I mean, they roasted it every which way. And basically the long and short of it is most of the prints are ridiculously varied in size and are actually too small to be any kind of hominid that we know has ever existed. Some were in the range, but most were far too small. They also lack the rigid midfoot that would be required for anything that's walking bipedally, even in a shambling motion. And they had this weird, so like if you've ever walked around outside and like stepped in the mud, there's a very specific way that the substrate forms around your foot. And upon closer examination of these prints, nothing even remotely close to the proper push-out pattern occurred, basically, were some of their primary criticisms. There was also no point where they could distinguish a consistent amount of toes. There was no real average footprint size. And all of those things together, combined with the fact that it looks a whole lot like maybe a Miocene bear print, led Sarmiento and Meldrum to be like, look, if these are footprints, they're definitely not hominin footprints, but also they lack a lot of characteristics to be footprints in general. If they are Miocene bear prints, then they're certainly a type of print that requires very specific substrate conditions that would have been unlikely given the paleo environment of Crete at that time. So they go way more in depth on that particular, these aren't footprints in their actual paper, which you can find and see for free online. So I definitely recommend it. Jeff Meldrum and Esteban Sarmiento, Comments on the Miocene Hominin Tracks. And they include a bunch of very fun pictures as well. But also, creationists like to use this to suggest, okay, look, because there's no bipedal hominids that are consistently bipedal around 5.6 million years ago, these prints must have been made by a human, right? They must be
by a modern human.
Yeah, therefore proving that humans lived alongside all of the other hominids and aren't descended.
Wow.
And so you see this and you're like, okay, so our ancestors were very small. I mean, we're talking like 3 to 4 feet tall on a good day. And these prints are too small for them. And yet these guys want to propose that they're anatomically modern humans. The size is wrong. They're probably not footprints. But let's say for a moment that they are. And let's say for a moment that they are made by a primate. It wouldn't it's still, even if all of those things were true, it would change up anthropology a bit, but it has no real bearing on evolution, because we know that gorillas and bonobos and chimpanzees all opportunistically walk bipedally, and Europe was crawling with apes at this time period. So it would not be completely out of left field to suggest that the prints were made by some momentarily shambling, early Miocene, late Oligocene ape hanging around in Crete. So, no matter how you want to come at this, if they're footprints made by an ape, it's still not a problem. But they're probably not footprints made by an ape, and in fact, they're probably not footprints at all. And that's my I made a very even longer video about this if you want to see me really like.
But a good video.
I like it. I have a soft spot in my heart for that one. That was like, getting some serious busting in.
Yeah.
Well, for people who want to watch it, links are down in the description to both Erika and Jackson, and for the Theists, we can always say, well, we still have the footprints in Glen Rose, Texas, which are undeniable human footprints along with dinosaur footprints. So.
Big oof. I think the best part of the Glen Rose footprints is even ICR said, please stop using this argument. Please. You're making us look bad.
Straight up, I don't know if you I apologize profusely for those of you who did manage to catch my discussion with Nephilim Free the other day on Modern Day Debate, but he still trots out the Paluxy Prince, which I'm like, how is this possible? It gives me stomach ulcers to discuss the Paluxy Prince with any level of like taking it seriously.
To be honest, I do think you deserve some kind of trophy. I mean, G-Man and Nephilim Free and standing for truth.
G-Man and I have fun.
You are a saint. I don't know how you did that. To this day I have never talked to him, but I have seen people talk to him, and how you worked that conversation. That was amazing.
That was really so. I think G-Man is probably the most difficult person to talk to, because he's a presuppositionalist when it comes to atheists. All atheists lie. There's no atheist who tells you the truth, and the fact that he stuck around and didn't blow up during the conversation, that took a massive effort. So
hey,
you deserve a medal.
Honestly, that talk with G-Man, I went in there with the knowledge that those things can go south, and so I was kind of just like, let's keep it light and breezy. And I guess I also just happened to catch him on a good day, because although he did tell me he went full G-Man, I don't believe that he actually did.
He didn't.
If he went full G-Man, he would have full left. So.
Yeah. I don't think he went full G-Man. G-Man, normally we didn't even get to see G-Cat, which is normally a prerequisite for a G-Man conversation, and I actually feel kind of slighted that I didn't get G-Man or G-Cat shoved into the webcam.
You deserve it.
At this point. I know. I ask so little, and I'm still disappointed.
The last conversation I had with Neffy was the last conversation I'm going to have with Neffy. Never again. I'm never doing that crap again.
My thing with Neffy is like, his arguments are just not like modern at all. Like I think RJ put it best. Like you can really tell which generation of creationist he belongs to by the arguments that he uses. You've got standing with the modern Jensen stuff, and then you've got Neffy trotting out the Paluxy Prince, and like
Neffy is just. Neffy's level of argumentation is potato. So
yeah, I know. Believe me. Yeah. Although I did consider it a win in that conversation when, like, right out the gates, he was like, "Yeah, we don't have a solution for the heat problem, but and then I was like, "Yes," and he was like, "But there's so much overwhelming evidence that it happened that it doesn't matter." And I was like, so close.
I equate Nephilim Free with Hovind. They've got a set standard of things they call evidence. The weirdest part with Neffy is that he thinks that we have machines inside of us. He at some point he discovered a channel that had animations of the human cell. And so what they did is they made their interpretation of how this works. So you got a conveyor belt where things were assembled, and he actually thought that was what humans have inside their cells. And that's where I got kicked off of his channel, because I tried to point out to him, this is not real, right? I mean, that this is an animation and it's made to make you understand how it works, but it's not actually. There's not a conveyor belt with different machines, robots who will stand.
I know where Jackson's about to go. Go ahead, go dunk on him, Jackson. Dunk on him.
Oh well, I mean, I was. Well, you're probably thinking about the carbohydrate thing, but I was actually thinking about I was going for a more general point about, even though, yes, I did. That definitely crossed my mind. But I was going for a more general point about when you look past the creationist arguments you realize there's no there. None of them are, none of the YouTube creationists, the brain trust, as Erika labeled them, they have no background in any of this. None of them. I think there's, once you realize that, like, the arguments they're putting forth, this is just a script, right?
Yeah.
This is just their little shtick. But if you get them off the script, which they cannot allow, you realize they don't know anything about these topics. Standing doesn't know anything about genetics. Neffy doesn't know anything about geology. They just don't know anything, because, and it's just that they never studied these subjects in depth, as though they're just trying to understand them. This is all polemic. They're all just doing it for the argument.
Well, and to that point, you know, when you do get them off script, you might be able to get an inch on saying, okay, they'll say, all right, well, I need to look into that, but how do you explain? And then you're like, all right, and they're right back on it. You know, I mean, it's like chipping away at a very large and very dense wall.
A constantly growing wall.
Yeah, constantly growing.
I'm not entirely sure, but did Neffy, when he talked to you, also mentioned the paper thin layer between the layers?
Paper thin.
We meme about that like all the time.
Paper thin I could not believe. I actually started laughing when my conversation with him, when he brought it up. I was like, I can't believe we're back at the paper thin layer. You mean bedding? He means bedding. Colton like roasted him on that on their debate, and he's still bringing it up. I can't believe it.
I can.
Paper thin layer.
RJ and I had a discussion with Neffy where he made a claim about the mutation rate in like humans and chimps, and he says, "Oh, you could never evolve humans from a common ancestor 6 million years ago." And he gives us this paper, and we're like, and we look at it, RJ and I do, and we're like, "Neffy, this is about deleterious mutation spectrum in humans. This has nothing to do with the mutation in evolution, period." And he says, okay, that doesn't matter because you can't go from common ancestor to humans. We're like, Neffy, what are you basing that on? And he literally says, this paper says it. We're like, Neffy, what?
Yeah, I've never to this day heard RJ get so angry.
I don't blame him. We went in a circle like 10 times, and he just kept saying, okay, you're right, it's not in the paper, but look at this paper, it says it. It's like, what the frick?
I know, yeah. That always comes out of left field and manages to floor me every time, even though you see it coming like a train down the tracks. Same arguments, same ground, and you might retread it across arguments, like, you know, it's there's no evolution, this is stasis.
Right. Oh, Christ. Oh my
God.
Well, we have a remark in the side chat. Brainbug says, but Dr. Nathaniel Jensen.
Oh my God.
He does have a degree, but like Purdom, he's not, whatever part of the brain it is they use to do science. I actually don't know if Jensen has contributed anything in the literature. I know Purdom has in cancer research, but whatever part of the brain it is that they use for science, they turn it off when they become creationists.
Well, yeah. Jackson, do you remember? I think that was a couple of years back when we were on PZ's channel talking about the movie. I think it was.
Oh yeah, Genesis Paradise Lost.
Yes.
Oh that was.
Well, we talked.
Man, I only went to that because Cystrike told me to go to that.
Yeah, where we talked about how there's can be a disconnect. Someone with an education like Purdom completely zoning out when it comes to everything else on evolution, and so.
Peter, you know what's funny about that movie is that was before Jensen was one of their big players. He was not in that movie.
Oh my God, that was so nice.
No, famously Todd Wood was, which I think is nice because I still keep linking to his blog.
He wasn't in. No, he wasn't in Genesis Paradise Lost. He was in The Bible is History.
Oh, it's Genesis.
Or-
It's the Genesis
Or
history.
is
Yeah.
Genesis History?
Yeah.
They're different movies, Peter.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
seriously, we went.
Barely.
Sci-Strike kept recommending like going to the theaters to see different bad creationist movies and stuff. He also recommended one which actually was narrated by John Rhys Davies, the guy who's for anyone who doesn't know, he plays Gimli in Lord of the Rings. He actually narrated this movie, which is about figuring out like which are the most ancient pieces of the Bible of biblical texts, and it's and at the very end of the movie, so they're going through. Actually, it's kind of interesting because they talk about carbon dating the fragments and looking at the language and figuring out they must have been this decade and not this one or this century. And so in some ways it was kind of interesting. But at the very end of the movie, they ask one of the archaeologists, they're like, "So does that mean it's true since it's really old?" And he's like, well, I'm sure some aspects of it are true." He's like caveats with everything.
It's the same logic as on Ancient Aliens, where it's like they have 3 quacks come on who are ancient alien astronomers, and then they've got like 2 guys who are actual like astronomy dudes, and they'll be like, tell us, what does the cratering of the moon look like? And he's like, yes, well, the cratering of the moon probably occurred during the late bombardment period, and yeah, it's pretty interesting. And then they're like, could it be that aliens are responsible for the craters on the moon? Our experts say yes. And then it's like the hair, and you're like, what? They lure them on with like a carrot on a string for talking about like real science, and then flip it around at the last minute.
This one guy tricked Lawrence Krauss and Michio Kaku into doing a geocentrist documentary. He would like he had I don't remember his name. I actually interacted with him on Facebook because he knew, of course, this Pentecostal young Earth creationist who I knew.
Oh my god!
And so we had a whole back and forth. But he got them on, and they're both talking about like, you know, where is our solar system with regard to the rest of the galaxy and stuff. And they're just kind of talking about it. They're just giving you some details on it. And he selectively cuts it so it sounds like they're saying we're at the center of the universe.
Oh my god!
You know, it was crazy. I don't remember the name of it. But Lawrence Krauss did an article. He's like, how I ended up in that stupid geocentrist documentary. Because afterwards he found out and he was furious. So
One of my favorite things is when creationists can't agree on something, and so they get mad at each other. And I find it very fun. It's like that. It's exactly that meme that I sent you guys on the chat, where it's like the 2 arms like joining together, roasting hydroplate theory, and it's like AIG and conventional science, because hydroplate is just bananas. Like,
yeah, or all the creationists on like Reddit jumping on Kent Hovind. It's the same with AIG. Yeah. All of the major creationist organizations like hate Kent Hovind.
They really, really hate him, including his son.
Yeah, his son went over to the. You're right. Yeah, he went over to the AIG side, and so he's against him. And then they had the whole lawsuit with each other, and so there was that fun bit.
And have you been following the latest? Because now Kent Hovind is suing Eric.
I did.
Planning to sue Eric, and also is pointing out that Eric stole the movie from the guy who created it. And yes, and so there's also someone else who's both on Twitter and on YouTube who claims that the guy who made the movie for Eric stole it from him, and has made a really compelling case. Because if you compare the scenes that are in Eric's movie and from this guy who's on YouTube complaining that they stole everything, they look amazingly alike. So I don't know, but it's so several scenes which are really, really similar. So he might have a case, but I'm really curious what's going to happen, because
that'll be neat.
I mean, to be fair, their book is based off of the same chapter of one book. It can't be that too far divergent.
Okay, but if you're going to make a 3D animation movie, and the way you depict the scene and your lion looks almost exactly like a lion that
Sure.
someone else has created
Sure.
already. Um, I don't know.
Well,
It's,
I
Man.
mean, the last movie I saw, actually, Hovind did appear in a movie, or Hovind Senior. He was in Matt Powell's stupid movie, which I
oh,
think calling it a movie is probably being too nice to it.
That is very
yeah.
generous.
It was a what do they call it?
And
Someone called it like a or a brochure, a creationist brochure, or something like that.
and you know who's going to be in the new one, right? Because
He's making another one.
Paolo's
Oh
making
my
another one.
God.
Guess who his star is?
Oh Christ, who is?
Standing for Truth.
What?
So
That's so funny. I think
Oh my god. Are you serious?
yes,
that's gravy.
yes.
Oh
saw-
my, that's juicy news. That is
Yeah.
very funny.
It's just gonna be. He's just gonna repeat all of the Jensen tropes and Sanford tropes. There's nothing of substance there.
You think Jensen and AIG will sue because he's just like parroting their work?
I doubt it. I mean, if they were gonna start suing people over intellectual dishonesty and stuff, they have a lot of lawsuits on their hands.
Yeah, very very true. My God, that is so funny.
I
my
just discovered that I'm in a movie. I'll have to check you out, Cafe. Movie about me. Oh, we'll see.
You should ask
No.
him. Did he get your good side?
Yeah. Do I have a good side?
Both sides are the good side here.
I don't know.
One-
But yeah,
One
so
of- one
so
of-
I follow Matt Powell since he famously ran away from our show when we told him that
Twice, Peter.
Yeah, we told him King James was gay, and then he rage quit. And a couple of days after that, he was supposed to be on Jackson's channel, and I was going to either moderate or host. I can't remember.
I don't remember.
Yeah, and so that never happened either.
Mercifully, I've shunted most of it from my mind. But it's the best argument that I think Matt Powell ever made, and he's one that's like, it's like Josh Feuerstein. Every time you think of him, people are like, "Oh my God, I forgot about him." Because the favorite thing that he said was, "Dinosaurs got decapitated by the meteor."
All
That's
of
what-
them?
Yes, apparently it went into a low orbit around the Earth, just decapitating dinosaurs.
Oh my God.
And that's what caused their extinction.
Wait. So
Wow.
they weren't mooned because according to Kent Hovind, the moon is receding, and so if you trace back to the time of the dinosaurs, the moon was so close that they were decapitated by the moon. He
No,
said they-
checkmate Alvarez.
yeah.
Tony Reed made, I think, the best point ever about that argument, which is that the moon recession argument is probably the worst one ever, because you have all of the tools necessary to debunk the argument within the argument itself. If you actually do
Yeah.
the math, it's really not that much closer to Earth.
It's just really not. And the wild thing is that it used to be like the way, part of how they used to try to get away with it is because a lot of the creationists didn't always accept Pangea, and obviously where land masses are and the size of the oceans impacts the recession rate. But now that they accept Pangea, it's like all of a sudden appeared on AIG's don't use as an argument list because they needed to.
Yeah, what I love is that they kind of can't decide whether it's Pangea or Rodinia, because
Yeah.
AIG uses Pangea and CMI uses Rodinia, and so
No, AIG uses Rodinia too, because I know Colton has told me that at the Ark encounter they have like a picture of like the flood coming in, and it's just of Rodinia.
so what
they
they're
use
doing then. Well, why not just include all the supercontinent? It's like a Bungie. They're just all running and smashing into each other
Yeah.
a whole bunch of times.
It's bumper cars.
they
Right.
they recently did a video, and I forgot the name. A geologist that works for AIG. I forgot his name. And
Snelling, Ord, Wise.
no,
Snelling?
no, it wasn't. It wasn't Snelling.
Was it Ord?
Austin?
No,
Was it Austin?
Austin. Yeah, Steve Austin,
Hmm.
the
Mm.
the $1 million man.
Mm.
So and he explained how there was a fast movement of the tectonic plates. I think it was a meter per second or something. So
My
it
God.
Melts the crust of the Earth multiple times.
yeah, that's how we ended up with the different land masses after the flood, because that obviously that happened after the flood, and then we got an ice age, and I have no clue how
Listen.
these people can get everything in this short amount of time. It's
Listen.
beyond me.
Take the time, if you really just want to give yourself, a hemorrhage, to research in depth the hydroplate hypothesis, because it makes Steve Austin and AIG look like a bunch of merit
Oh,
scholars.
that's the guy who Hovind
Walt
always
Brown.
brings up.
Walt Brown.
Walt Brown. Yeah.
Absolutely bananas.
Yeah.
I've
So
never seen anything like it.
no,
It's like tectonic plates weren't separate from each other until the fountains of the deep burst open, and that
Yeah.
was where the
A single granitic crust, 20 to 60 miles in diameter, split by the pressure of superheated underwater like cauldrons of water that then fires upward at something like it's something like a kilometer a second. It's like
Jesus
absolutely
Christ.
wild. It
Yeah.
goes up into the exosphere and falls down as super cooled rain that flash freezes the mammoths. That's the kind of thing we're dealing with here.
Yeah.
But forget the fact that we find mammoths with like all sorts of different marine fossils underneath it. Brian Nickel has this whole thing on lock. If you really want to see a trip, he's got a 6-part series that'll absolutely kill an afternoon.
Well, okay. So, and then I've got a tip for you. Have you heard of Richard Kent?
Richard Kent, no.
So Richard Kent is from the UK, and they have a TV channel where he's on frequently. He used to host that himself, and now they're different hosts. He's the guy who came up with the explanation for the fire-breathing dragons, because
No,
yes,
the Parasaurolophus one.
the dinosaurs.
No, that was Dwayne Gish.
The
That was Gish.
dinosaurs had nostrils the size of a horse nostril, and after the flood, when the dome collapsed, there was less pressure, so it was harder to breathe. So the dinosaurs had to breathe so hard that and the air went up their nose so fast that due to the friction, it lit on fire. And that's how we got the fire-breathing dragons.
Checks out.
Yeah, it's what's great about the fire breathing Parasaurolophus thing is like Gish never actually explained what he thought, because his only proxy for it was the bombardier beetle, which does not breathe fire, it does not shoot fire, it does not. It's even the it wasn't even like super hot. I don't think, but because someone took Gish to a place where they showed him, they mixed the chemicals together, the two chemicals that are involved in that reaction, the bombardier beetle, and they're like, look, it didn't explode. And he saw that and continued to say afterwards that they would explode when mixed. And so there's just literally no explanation for it. It's like, what would be the evolutionary pressure for that anyway? I mean, you use it once and you're dead.
Yeah, that would have to be a very slow stepwise process, right? I mean, with very specific dietary requirements too.
Yeah, there's no selective pressure for it, because if you have it, you don't pass it on.
Yeah.
You never have to use it. I mean, good lord.
The wild, I mean, to be fair, I mean, Gish is a very special individual, was a very special individual, may he rest in peace, when it comes to using outdated kind of creationist jargon.
Yeah.
His book, Dinosaurs by Design, which is upstairs right now in my very domicile, he's still got that picture of the Japanese plesiosaur hanging from the end of the fishing trawler that's just a decomposing basking shark.
Oh my god.
And that's the one that Walt Brown himself was like, ooh, yeah, that kind of does look like a decomposing basking shark, and like recanted it. If Walt Brown's doing better than you are, you really need to reevaluate.
There.
To be fair, Hovind uses that still too.
Oh, I'm not surprised.
Mm.
What is it in Donald Prothero's book, Evolution: What the Fossils Say and Why It Matters? He talks about the debate that he had with Gish back in the '90s, and Prothero went first, and he's showing all these different evolutionary transitions among dinosaurs, and he's like, because one of Gish's arguments was there's nothing connecting the sauropods to anything else, and Prothero's like, here are the prosauropods, you have Plateosaurus, all these guys who are facultative quadrupeds. And then Gish goes after him and just goes, see, there's nothing linking sauropods to any other dinosaurs. There's no facultative quadrupeds or anything. It's like, what?
Oh my god. I feel like I remember, because I have What the Fossils Say and Why It Matters as well. It's got like Tiktaalik on the front. I think it's like a second edition.
Yeah.
But I think too he covers like Protoceratops as well, and Gish just straight up ignores it like that, which blows my mind. Like I would love to have seen that debate, because I would have loved to see Prothero be like motions excited to the PowerPoint, like what are you talking about?
Yeah, if they like had their own individual screens, and so Gish is like, where is this? He has got like the little laser pointer. He's like, it's right there.
Yeah, he's like throughout the entirety of Gish's presentation.
Yeah,
Gish was an odd bird.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's kind of like my debate was standing too, where just creationists don't talk about biogeography.
No,
that's like that's almost 100% failure rate, because the only thing they can say is like, the only thing they ever think about is Noah's flood, obviously, the Middle East. Okay, how the frick were you getting like animals that can't fly on these distant islands? How is that working? How do you get the Tuatara and
volcanoes?
Yes, volcanoes are being shot across the entire planet.
They a lot of times they appeal to like random land bridges too, which is like interesting, because we know the Bering Strait land bridge is there because it left traces of itself.
Right.
So where's the traces for all of these other land bridges? And in my last talk with Nephi, he was like, I asked him, I was like, all right, so, how are you getting your monkeys? How are you getting your New World monkeys to South America? And then, like, I was like, he's going to say, well, evolutionists, invoke the rafting hypothesis. And I was like, which is true. We do invoke the rafting hypothesis.
Because it works.
Yeah, and because one, it works, but two, we're dealing with massive oligopithecid populations. I mean, they're just crawling all over the Fayum. So it's like how, you've got one chance with these guys. If anything happens to that one little raft right after they come off the boat, you've got some serious problems. Whereas now we're just throwing oligopithecids at South America until they stick.
Pretty much, yeah, and it's not even the only one that's hypothesized to have rafted. There's also the hystricognath rodents and a few other groups that probably also did. And we even have observational evidence that the rafting hypothesis works via the iguanas in Anguilla.
Yeah, they just do it all the time.
Yeah. We know the exact day they arrived in Anguilla.
What I'd be curious of is...
Go ahead.
Yeah, what I'd be curious of is, so God told Noah after the flood, now you can eat meat, and the same goes for the meat-eating animals. Where did the meat-eating animals get their food from?
They were herbivores. then they
No,
magically
because
became.
after the flood they could eat meat.
Peter, why are you thinking about all this? This
I
is-
I kid you not. I've heard suggestions of like they were just eating detritus and like scavenging from all the dead things that have just been like bloated and underwater for a year. Um, on top of that, you have to ask. I mean, the classic thing. This just shows the extent of like physiology that any given creationist has taken, despite the fact that David Menton is like an anatomist or whatever.
Oh yeah, yeah.
They'll point to a skull, right? Like I've got one here that I always keep on my desk because I think it's cool, of a rhesus macaque, and they'll be like, "Look at that rhesus macaque. It's got these crazy sharp teeth, and yet, if you can see the teeth now that I'm like blocking out the, there you go." And it's like, and yet it eats vegetables. So who's to say that dinosaurs with just a mouthful of sickle-shaped like daggers wasn't doing the same thing? And then the answer, of course, is yeah, but this rhesus macaque has molars, and more importantly, it's a monogastric, therefore it's omnivorous, but its gut flora heavily indicates a reliance on fruits and nuts and things like that. Like you're not gonna have a T-Rex with a 4-chambered stomach, that's going out there and mowing down lawns with its giant teeth. I mean, you got to look at all sorts of different things to find the diet of something. Teeth alone usually can tell you a lot, but certainly not every.
Well, the fact that we now have, the literal teeth of T-Rex embedded in hadrosaurs like Edmontosaurus, and we have Tyrannosaur coprolites with bone fragments in them. It's like, okay, guys, this is getting like the killer on camera at this point. You got to stop.
See, Jackson, but those are the fossils that were
They're post-flood.
Deposited, yeah, post-flood.
Well, but that also makes you wonder because
Probably
they're in
by
certain
the Ice
strata.
Age. We need to make a creationist wiki and just
We could
make up stuff and see if they adapt it and if they're going to use it, and then after let's say year and a half, then post on the wiki that it's actually run by atheists and we're putting
just
the
trolling
most
them,
ridiculous nonsense on there.
The most wild thing about it too that drives me crazy is like you really have to give them credit. They're very well organized and they know how to make their stuff look decently professional.
Sure.
So it's like conventional science feels no need to directly address each and every one of the claims because they're so ludicrous. So it leaves like people who have time and the energy and like the masochism to like come up with resources for anybody who's like, hey, I'm trying to get out of this, this whatever very, very unsupported worldview, a little bit high and dry as far as like a single conglomeration of resources, which is why the rocks were there. Play Shameless Shell is such a good resource.
Ooh, Deb. Yeah. So, yeah, you're right. I would also tend to agree with that, although I am very unbiased in this regard, of course.
Of course. Definitely not an author.
I was also I was also thinking about your point with regard to the land bridges thing, because I was thinking about the Falkland Islands off the coast of South America and how they have thanks humans, the Wara population, and I was like, because they also found evidence of like Ice Age land bridges connecting the islands to the mainland of South America, and so it's like, you're right. Where we do have the land bridges, there's obvious evidence of the land bridges, but not just crossing the middle of the Atlantic where we have the Mid-Atlantic Ridge or something like that.
And the wild thing about that is that it's like they are so routed by the flood in all of this, because from our perspective, like, okay, theoretically there could have been a land bridge, I suppose, at some point in the Devonian. Maybe there have been land bridges in the past that through time have and geologic processes are no longer like detectable easily.
Sure.
And maybe we'll find some in the future, but they can't do that in their model because we have land bridges that are still around. So the question is, why are the small ones here, but the one that's supposed to connect Southeast Asia to Australia gone?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, Bill Nye made that point in his debate with Ken Ham. He's like, submarines regularly go through that territory, both the Australian and U.S. the submarines. So Where's the land bridge?
Where's the land bridge?
But even more interestingly is how distinct the faunas are, the flora and the fauna of Southeast Asia and the northern Oceania is, and because it's Gondwana and Laurasia, and these faunas came together way after, way later, and so that's why they're separate to this day. That's why Alfred Russel Wallace is famous.
Yeah, Wegner's lines too tell us like how things used to fit together, at least in the past. The most recent conglomerate or fit together supercontinents, right? Listosaurs, yeah.
Oh yeah, Lystrosaurus. The Glossopteris, Mesosaurus. Yeah, there are a couple of them, which, for Pangea, are all very nice, and of course we can now predict like marsupials in that were in Australia. That was predicted, or Antarctica. The fact that marsupials crossed from South America to Australia was predicted, but
wouldn't it be nice to get a hold of a good, Antarctic fossil record too? Too bad the whole thing's covered in ice. I guess that'll be fixed soon enough.
Yeah. I met one of the paleontologists, Dr. Julia Clark, who works or who does digs down there. She actually found a Vague avis.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, they do. I guess like pretty much the only place you can do the digs is kind of the surrounding islands and like the coasts. Really,
Which checks out with our aquatic birds.
Yeah, I don't think there's, or I don't know if you can do much more towards the interior. I guess not really.
Well, the
problem, it would be very expensive, I imagine.
Too bad it's all an ice wall too. It's all fake.
Yeah, the problem is the penguins that are armed and keep you away because obviously the Earth is flat. So
yeah, they're actually cyborg penguins, and
yes.
they cock their heads back and a laser pops out.
Well, I imagine like a bunch of penguins with like little berets, and they've got their automatic weapons, and they're patrolling the area.
They gotta be flippin' friendly.
which brings me to one of the most recent conspiracy theories. You know why we have COVID now, right?
No, the 5G towers.
No. So,
even better.
So birds and especially pigeons are fake. And so
that's definitely true.
They needed new batteries, so they needed to get the people off of the streets, so they could replace the batteries in the pigeons, which are actually robots created to spy on us. That's actual conspiracy.
You say it's just a conspiracy theory. Our cardinals were not in the yard for like the first month of COVID, so I'm thinking this is some pretty good evidence.
Yeah.
Listen, this checks out. Our current hypothesis is supported. Let's call it a day. It's done. They're all fake. We know it.
Could you imagine? Could you imagine like finding a because these birds, they happen to fly into like windows and stuff, and they're on the ground, and then just being like, oh, I found the batteries. No one has like ever done that. It's always just, hey, look at this dead bird, which is decomposing.
Yeah, and several end up in the front of your car. So that never leaves any traces of technology. But
you sure would think those big ass ostriches would be leaving some mega batteries, like. No, those ones are wind powered. I forgot.
Oh my god. Could you? Well, I love that so much. It's like that is so detached from every form of reality it is possible to have.
It's not new either, because a couple of years back, a guy was on the news somewhere on a news station in America, and had a website, Birds Are Fake.
No, yeah, people have been joking about it for at least a couple of years.
I thought that was literally a meme, like based off the flat Earth. But I have to tell you, knowing that he's from the U.S. means like I'm just unsurprised at this point.
Yeah, it's most likely true. But so we've come up to an hour and a half, and we usually end our shows after an hour and a half. Erika, is there anything you want to touch on and maybe shield yourself a little? Can people throw some money at you b- for the good work
you
that you're
can
doing?
support me on Patreon if you desperately are in need of getting rid of hordes of money. You can throw it at me on Patreon if you'd like. I mean, all of my Patreon stuff just is going towards better equipment for recording and things like that, so I look less pixelated on camera. But also, we are in a very, very unique time right now. So absolutely do not feel obligated. I making content is something I love to do regardless. So, I'm always going to be making it whether people are, being patrons or not. I get it. Things kind of suck right now for everyone. Um, I guess you can find me on YouTube, Gutsick Gibbon. You can find me on Twitter. I make decent tweets sometimes. Sometimes they're funny. Sometimes they're of bugs and arthropods that I find in my yard. Um, so yeah, that's Gutsick_Gibbon. Let me think. There's something to leave everyone with. Some good advice. Um, I don't know. We live in some very strange times. Be kind to those around you. Be good apes.
Yeah, and can I be a little bit mean and
Please.
just say, so your Patreon goes to better equipment. Can we get this guy decent internet too?
Yeah, Jackson. Yeah, someone paid to
Just
move Jackson to a different state.
I was
just
about to say, changing my internet service is not really going to help. You need to move the whole house.
Yeah. Just we need to get some helicopters over there and some very big magnets.
Not Florida.
Yeah,
not
not
Florida.
Florida.
You know
Don't
what?
do that to him.
Maybe like I don't know. I kind of like the east. Maybe like the North Carolina region. That's kind of nice.
Yeah, nice and temperate. As someone from the Midwest, we have temperate seasons. That's literally the only good thing about living here. Is we get
I don't know.
all
I would
four
go to the
seasons.
beach. You know,
Yeah.
I say that, but I would probably be like, all right, I went to the beach once. I'm going home. I'm done.
Yeah, I feel like the beach would get old if you're not like into fishing or like surfing or something. I don't know.
Right.
Beach
Yeah.
sports.
Beach stuff.
Yeah,
okay.
not PZ
So
says not Yankee enough. Minnesota.
At Peas, if you know what, maybe if you got a room in your house, I'll take.
Yeah, PZ, are you gonna put him
P-
up? Are you gonna?
If you're offering, I mean,
PZ at least has good winters. I mean,
and he's got cats. I love cats. I've got Enzo over here somewhere.
Aww. My cat is out and about right now. He's lurking. This is actually kind of a funny anecdote. So I have my cat is a domestic long hair. He's just kind of a mutt cat, I guess, but he's all black, very long fur. He kind of looks like the soot spirits from Spirited Away. Anyways, there is a stray cat that lives near my house that looks identical to him, and so Jude tries to get out. That's my cat's name, like from the Beatles, like "Hey Jude." I have to say that because sometimes over the internet it sounds like I'm saying his name is Jew, which is a little bit not great. Anyways, earlier today I'm sitting outside and this black cat goes running across the yard and I'm like, holy shit, Jude got out again. And then I was like, God, I'm such an idiot. It's just this stray cat. So I go upstairs. Jude's nowhere to be seen. It was actually him. So we got him back in the house. It was fine. But, the doppelganger life is not one that I recommend. Find unique cats if they're going to get outside.
okay. So Jackson, you're ready to go. PC has 2 spare rooms, and he says he has good
Boy.
internet too.
Boy, let's do it. I mean,
Yeah.
at least we need like a trial week first, though. Just
Yeah,
to see.
go visit. For the
Yes,
Yeah.
I would definitely visit.
And
Actually, you've said your town is kind of small. Shreveport's kind of small, so I'd probably do okay. Overall, I'm not a big city person.
and you have to get used to the spiders.
What? Well, I do have a scorpion, but spiders are still a little bit beyond me right now.
Okay.
Aw.
So I really want to wrap this up. Erika, thank you so much for coming on. For the people who are interested, we're still planning on doing a show with someone who is a little bit confused about human evolution, and Erika graciously has agreed to come back as a co-host to do that show. So keep an eye on our Twitter. Make sure you subscribe, and subscribe to Jackson and to Erika, so you'll be sure not to miss anything. Yeah, it was a blast. I could have done
Absolutely.
this at least another hour and a half. It's a lot of fun. So thank you so much for coming on, Erika.
Thank you for having me. Again, it's very difficult to shut me up about these kinds of topics. So
Which
it's
is actually kind of nice if you're hosting the show, because then you can just sit back and listen and learn, because that's what it's all about. I mean,
Oh, I totally agree. I totally agree.
we need to keep learning. So
Mm.
stick around. We have a little commercial and an outro, and then I'll come back into the room with the both of you. I want to thank everyone in the side chat. PZ, I'm going to contact you. I want that rant about Hovind. I'd love to have that rant about Hovind. That sounds like fun. So yeah, as I said, everyone in the chat, thanks for dropping by, and we'll be back soon with a new guest at another time. So catch you all later. Bye bye.